Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We are at the Reporters Roundtable to discuss some of the top stories of the week. My guests are Sonia Ross, Editor-in-Chief with Black Women Unmuted, Emil Harris, reporter with the Washington Informer, and freelance news reporter and editor Brian Womack. Thank you all for joining the conversation. We've got a lot to get into today. I want to start with the Trump trial, the hush money trial. The jury has been deliberating for several hours, as we understand it. Of course, Trump is charged with falsifying records before the 2016 election to hide payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Now, one of the interesting things that has happened today is that the jury instructions were a point of contention. The defense and prosecution argued over the exact language before Judge Juan Merchan, and of course, he alone decided on the content of instructions to the jury while they are deliberating. As we all know, the jury must be unanimous to convict or acquit Trump on each count. Let's talk about the broader issue here, and I'll start with you, Sonia. There was a lot of back and forth yesterday. We had some high-profile people pushing back on those who were supporting Trump yesterday. But here we are. The jury is deliberating. Your feelings about this. Do you care? Do you think this is important? I know it's historic. Go ahead, Sonia, your thoughts.
Well, of course it's important. When in American history have we ever had a former president accused of or in a criminal trial? Certainly not in modern times. And yes, it's important given the magnitude of the things that happened when Donald Trump was president last time and the very real possibility that he could become president again. So yes, this is super duper important. You have people out there who disconnect. Naturally, the process of choosing a president is important, right? But a lot of people don't take it that seriously. And there are probably people, they don't hang on every word, every morsel that's being reported. So they don't know absolutely every detail of what's happening. And they may say, so what if he paid hush money to this porn star? And yet, if you consider the load of evidence that the prosecution amassed and the obvious holes in the defense that was mounted by Trump's attorneys, you have to say he's going down for something. What is it? We don't know. And also the question is whether or not the election interference argument that the prosecution has put up will wash, because that's new. That's the new aspect of everything that's gone on here. Is he guilty of sending checks, having routed payments to his lawyer who paid Stormy Daniels? It looks that way. Is the reason that he did it to boost his chances of getting elected? We don't know. So that's what makes this trial so important.
Mm-hmm. Brian, if you were on this jury right now, do you think you would feel the pressure? I've been on several, and there is some pressure, but also your civic duty to do your job.
Yeah, I would feel, I feel like just like the executive branch, you have the weight on your shoulders of the country. This is not something that has been done before, as been stated previously. It's unprecedented. We are literally seeing if a former sitting U.S. president who may be elected again will be indicted and charged and sentenced on felony charges for hush money during his 2016 presidential campaign. And being a jury member, and making that decision, that's a lot. That's a lot to process, because you have to realize that his followers, including him, are known to sit there and vigorously attack people who are opposed to his views and opinions. And if you are one of the jury members, I would be afraid of the backlash. I'd be afraid of my family being targeted, me being doxxed. There's a lot of things to take in consideration with being a member of the jury with this. So it's scary, but like you said, it's a civic duty. It's something that you have to do. If I was on there, I would just have to do my best to make sure that the story is being conveyed of, yes, he was a president, but we have to look at the facts and determine whether or not he should be convicted or not. So yeah, it would be very hard. It would be very hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Hamil, I always try to look at these things not just from a journalism point of view, but also as a regular citizen. And one of the things that has always been fascinating to me is just based on jury selection that we saw weeks ago. If everything that jurors say is to be believed, that a lot of people aren't paying attention. They are focused on their lives, whatever that means. Let's assume that they are all telling the truth. Does that surprise you that a lot of them aren't paying attention to these things?
No, it doesn't surprise me. And in fact, I probably should be paying more attention to this, because we look at this. This is like a review. We had OJ reaches Watergate. We know all this stuff, the trial of the century. We got sex, lies, and videotape with Clinton and Lewinsky. We got all this stuff. So now the question is, what's changing? Is this going to make a difference in this election? It's still about getting your people to the polls. So again, this is kind of like the best of series, but have we moved the football to a new world? To me, it has not.
Yeah, what's old is new again.
Right. Just will it make a difference? I mean, the way this thing is stacked up now, and then again, it's a new sadness. And again, Trump doesn't have to worry about political advertising. He gets it every day in the evening news. He don't have to worry about paying for ads. He gets it free.
How long do you think, Sonia, this deliberation is going to go on? Are we going to see something quickly? Is this going to go on for days? Your thoughts about that?
That's anybody's guess. We don't know. But you got to figure like this. I was thinking about this yesterday. Like, if I were a juror sitting in the room listening to these closing arguments, and the defense took 2.5 hours, the prosecution took nearly 5. I've sat through that all day. We plowed into the evening. The last thing I want to do is drag it out any further. Let's get on with making a decision here. This trial's been going on for 5 weeks. I have held up 5 weeks of my life as a juror. Granted, we weren't sequestered, but it's taking up a lot of my time and my life. I have to think about what's going to happen to me after this. Can I milk it for opportunity? Any of that. And right now I have taken about all I can take of this. They have hammered on the same points over and over again. You got to think that there is at least one juror sitting in there saying, okay, we got it. Right. I hear you. Now let's get on with making a decision here. I don't see it dragging out past this week. If it drags out past this week, that's a huge problem, but human nature dictates that if I've sat through something this long, the last thing I want to do is force myself to sit through it much longer.
Yeah. Brian, I must admit, again, having had an opportunity to sit as a juror. One, a drug case, the other was murder. But, closing arguments, oh my Lord. What was it, 5 hours for the prosecution, some 4 hours for the defense. Is Sonia right? Do eyes glaze over at this point, and maybe somebody just says, let's just get it over with? Not to mention 34 counts. You got to take each one separately.
Exactly. Well, it's tiring for the lawyers.
Oh yeah.
So I know it has to be tiring for, the jury. These are regular law-abiding citizens who pay their taxes, who are now put into this position of determining whether or not these felony counts will go through and proceed. And with all those hours, it gets to a point where it's extremely tiring. I would be like, okay, we need to round this up. What is the core of this? Do we think that we have enough substantial evidence to sit there and prove that he did misappropriate funds during his 2016 campaign? Did he falsify the documents? We just need to get to the core of it. Things are being repeated over and over again, and even in the final statements, it's like, come on, So I agree. I think it gets to a point where the jury is like, let's just move on with it.
Yeah.
But
Go ahead, Camille.
And yet, though, I'm fascinated with the whole issue about Barron Trump's graduation. Will he become a delegate to the convention? No, his mother said, no, he's not going up there. So it's almost like Melania Trump and her son, like the stars of the show without being on trial, because you see this dose of reality. It's like, do we have to go through this? And based on that, it could really blow up, and his own personal family more than it is so now. So again, it is relevant.
Right.
But the question, we still just don't know what's going. Will he get a handshake? Will he get from his own wife, a hug, So again, the things that people are interested in are ordinary people things. And that
and I think you do make an interesting point that outside the criminal accusation, because the alleged crime is whether or not he was utilizing all of these things to as an election issue. It really isn't about adultery. This isn't even about paying a porn star. It really has to do with what was his mindset with as it related to paying Stormy Daniels. If it was, and this is what the jury has to figure out and determine, if he was just trying to hide this from his wife or his family, yes, there's no crime. But if this was a campaign finance issue, then that's a completely different issue, and trying to understand the mindset of an accused is difficult. And the judge did say that you have to kind of use your common sense as it relates to this particular issue. So certainly something to discuss. Listen, before I take a break, I just want to let you know that on the other side, we're going to be talking about the Black vote. President Biden on his way to Philadelphia today to court the Black votes. I want you to think about that, because that's a really, really important issue in this political season. So stay with us. We are going to take a break. Don't forget, you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The Daily Drum will continue on Sirius XM channel 141. The Original Quiet Storm with John Mons is next. That's on WHUR. We'll be back on Sirius XM channel 141 in just a bit. I'm Harold Fisher. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue at the Reporters Roundtable discussing some of the top stories of the week. My guests are Sonia Ross, editor-in-chief with Black Women Unmuted, Emil Harris, reporter with the Washington Informer, and freelance reporter and editor Brian Womack. Before the break, I was talking about the Black vote. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are stepping up their re-election pitches to Black voters. They are launching a new Black voter outreach effort while they're in Philadelphia today. They will stop at Girard College, which is an independent boarding school in Philadelphia with a predominantly Black student body. Also, they're going to visit with small business owners, and they're going to speak with the Black Chamber of Commerce. Hamil, what's going on with Biden and the Black vote? Yesterday, I spoke with Derek Johnson, president of the NAACP. He says, don't believe the hype or the polls that say that Black voters are not supporting Joe Biden.
Well, again, they're not going to flock to Trump in mass numbers, but any decline, and there is a decline that started last when Trump ran the first time, we saw this kind of peeling off of the black vote. But at the same time, where will they go? And I hate to say it like that, because despite Trump and whatever, say Biden, there still is tepid or maybe lukewarm support for Trump in terms of, winning new voters. People who seem to be alienated are just kind of frustrated with the status quo. And so I still wonder what we have lost. It makes a difference. And Sonia can tell you this. She was at AP forever. You think about Reverend Jackson. You think about the Black church. You think about civil rights leaders, John Lewis. We know all these people who knew how to mobilize the vote because it was just that important. I don't see that anymore. I hear a little bit here, a little over there, but our community is somewhat diluted from the past. So again, it's going to go down. And the question is, how much will the other community go up? Again, I just don't see the fire in the belly anymore. And I look for the fire in the belly. So
Brian, you're nodding your head. What do you think?
Well, I think historically in presidential campaigns, we have to sit there and acknowledge that the minority vote is powerful, particularly with Black women. And the program that President Biden and Kamala Harris, VP, is talking about specifically invests in community groups and faith centers across the country. And that was according to NBC Philadelphia. That's one of the initiatives. We have to look now at what are the core values that we're using to determine whether or not we should have ex-president representing the country. I make a point to say that people who are voting is either going to be Joe Biden or Trump at this point. And you have to determine whether or not which of those values pertain to you. And I would highly suggest that people, really start going out there, doing their research, making more informed decisions before they go down and vote, because this will make or break us as a nation. And getting the faith-based groups to come and rally behind you is going to be an uphill battle for Biden.
Sonia, Hamil was talking about several generations ago, one and more generations ago. But what about the new Black voters, the young Black voters? That, based on these past several polls, anecdotally, what we've seen in news reports about Black men, young Black men, not being interested in supporting not just Joe Biden, but the Democrats, and leaning toward, Donald Trump. What, in your opinion, what's missing?
Well, let me just say one thing about polls. They have never, ever, ever captured the true positioning of Black American voters.
Angela Brooks would disagree with you.
Yeah, I know that's right.
Well, no, when I say that, what I mean is media reporting and standard of the methodology standard. The methodology standard doesn't it requires sampling to the point where it is difficult to get a sufficient number of people of color in any sample to be able to accurately gauge what people of color are thinking. And the organizations that do that type of polling, typically their polls are not acknowledged by traditional media, legacy media, whatever you want to call the mainstream media, because of whatever rationale they come up with. Well, it was done by an advocacy group, or it was this one used a list of surnames that may or may not be Hispanic, and you can say they're Garcia on there, but Garcia might be from Germany. We don't know. And so the problem is, invariably, media are going to have to come up with a better coverage standard, a methodology standard, in order to accurately reflect the attitudes of the voters that are out there. Now, that said, what you've seen traditionally, and I love our young voters. Gosh, we do need more of our young voters engaged and actively participating in the process. But there is a distinct lack of access to institutional knowledge for them as voters. And if so, they would understand. I don't know how old you are, Brian, because, black
I'm
don't crack.
34. I'm 34.
Well, let's talk about 40 years ago when Jesse Jackson was running for president and what the youth vote knew and understood at that time. And there were plenty of us who were young who said, "Run, Jesse, run," when the media had absolutely no appetite for a black candidate. They said he didn't have a snowball's chance in hell, the same way they said Shirley Chisholm didn't have a snowball's chance in hell. But it resonated with young voters. And even though Jesse Jackson did not get the Democratic nomination, what he got was a lot of young black people on the polls, on the election rolls and to the polls. For that election, I was a young voter. Emil, I'm sure you were a young voter then. And casting that vote was very important, even though we didn't understand how it could ever mean much of anything. Fast forward to now, and there have been several attempts to light a fire among younger voters. Do you remember the Vote or Die campaign and how important that was? And young voters do kick in periodically, but what we tend to see with our young voters is they will voice their opinion and sit at home on election day. So there is only so much you can do to get them to the polls. Lord knows we want them to be as excited as possible. Go in and vote for the candidate of your choice. But for the love of God, stop watching the bright, shiny things that pop up on social media and pop up in reporting that say this candidate is beating the brakes off that candidate, and make a decision based on what your intelligence and your logic tell you.
I like what Sonia just said, because I just seem to get the impression now that maybe Trump may not be as big and bad as we think he is or whatever. It's just like the Alsobrooks. I missed that. We all didn't think Alsobrooks was going to perform that well as a Senate candidate in the state of Maryland. And now she did really well. And Biden may just do really well. It may not be the hottest topic, but I don't see what the Republicans are doing to legitimately get the big votes like they want. And I don't see the Democrats getting, it may not be as big a field, but it may be a blowout.
Mm.
Well, wasn't that the case in 2020? Didn't we see that? Well, there was allegedly going to be a big red wave.
And it didn't trickle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And in 2022 as well with the midterms. But Brian, and I think this is this a blind spot for a generation or of some Black people where the issue of race is critical, and then maybe for younger Black voters, green trumps black? I like the way I said that. Green trumps black. All kinds of play on words in there. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I hope I can answer this question really well. I mean, one of the things that we have to discuss is Project 2025 and the things that are supposed to be enacted if we do, in fact, get a Republican candidate as the winner and president. It is quite scary. Some of the things that have been talked about are eradicating certain terms towards different minority groups. We're already seeing some of it with Ron DeSantis in Florida. If being taught history, if it makes you uncomfortable, we don't have to teach you this. Certain books are being removed from libraries. This is not something that's new. It's just a really scary time right now. I think the way to get to the Black vote is to be very transparent in what Biden has done during his time. I think historically Democrats are a little bit more passive in displaying what they've done on the legislative level versus Republicans. You see that Trump was a lot more aggressive with his campaigning. He's not afraid to go and rally and talk about, this is what I want to do and this is what I want to do, and Biden hasn't done this and Biden hasn't done that. We need to actually be the same way and be a little bit more effective in saying, well, in fact, we need to fact check you. And as a member of the administration, this is what we've done. I think that's the way to get more of the younger Black vote. And also a note to make, again, I'm in my 30s. I do remember a time before social media. My first social media was MySpace. These kids now do not know what MySpace is or was, excuse me. They have TikTok, and they have a very short attention span, 2 to 3 seconds at the most. The problem now with campaigning is, how do we get within those short few seconds enough information to tell them how important their vote means? That's something that the Biden administration, both of them, are going to have to tackle in order to try to get the appeal of the younger vote, the Gen Zers. So we have a lot of work to do. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah,
I agree with Brian, actually, because here's the thing. Standard voter education in this election doesn't make a difference. What has to happen is education about life under authoritarian systems. I don't think there is enough education out there among our voting population in general, because in this country, everyone's been free for so long, they don't understand what happens when freedoms get taken away. And so getting an understanding of authoritarian positioning, rather than saying, look at all these things I've done for you as president, or here are the things I'm going to do as president. You need to say, if the system in this country changes fundamentally, what would your life look like?
yeah.
And that's the key to getting anybody to the polls. It's not about Biden being perfect or Trump being innocent. It is very much about what type of life would you lead under either one of these men.
But you know what's good though? Have you noticed? I enjoy looking at Congress again. The whole thing between Marjorie Taylor Greene and the sister from Texas. She's like the young version of a Maxine Waters, and you see a sense of pride. People say, "Oh, we got enough." So you have a whole new wave of younger Democrats, and the Republicans are like, "Oh, we're getting pummeled here," and they don't know how to counteract this. And
exactly.
Because social media, that's the new show. That's the
but so here is the thing, and this is an argument that I've had for many years, is that particularly for Black progressive voters who live in, say, a Washington D.C., one of the things that a lot of them do not understand, and I have to constantly remind people in this discussion, if you have only lived in an urban area or a suburban area around a major area such as Washington, D.C., and you are a Black progressive voter, you may not understand why a Marjorie Taylor Greene exists. But she was duly elected, and in her district, the reason that she was elected was because there are a lot of people who think the way that she does or supports what she stands for.
Well, now Marjorie Taylor Greene was elected because there was no other name on the ballot. That's the first thing.
But that's my point.
She was unopposed, and she was unopposed because
that's exactly my point.
The rumor is that she sicked some goons on her opponent and intimidated him out of the race.
But again, and I use Marjorie Taylor Greene as as just one example. But to speak about the issue more broadly, for those progressive voters who look at ultra right wing members of Congress, for example, and wonder, well, how do these people get elected? Because in their opinion, they may think their views are just so far afield from what they may consider common sense. And the reason I say that, you have to remember, this is a really big country. Black people are only 12% of the population. And I've said this time and time again. There are places in this country where you can live as a white person and never have interaction with Black people ever.
Can I say this real quick?
Go right ahead.
So when I left being an editor in Baltimore for WJZ and I went to become a news reporter in South Dakota, the other larger demographic other than Black people, as far as people of color, were Native Americans. And I saw the disparities between that. But your point is duly noted. When I lived in a place called Whitewood, South Dakota, I was literally the person that stood out. There was one other Black person who happened to be biracial and identified as Black, and then there was me. They did not see a lot of people like me, and their opinions and views changed a little bit with me being there and being from a big city like Baltimore, having lived here most of my life and experienced things on a different level. It took me moving and meeting those people, those individuals, and sharing my experiences and sharing what the political climate was in a place like Maryland versus a place like Whitewood, South Dakota, for them to get a different perspective. So absolutely, that happens. It can be quite a discussion. You know, you'll be surprised when you live in different places in the country, the viewpoint, you know, it's sometimes it's hard to swallow.
Yeah, it is. And I think for, for those of us who have not had, those experiences, sometimes it puts us at a disadvantage because we are, like many conservatives, middle of the road people, we have a tendency to be in our own political silos and not really understand how the rest of the country thinks. Let me move on to this next local issue. This story just coming out yesterday. The DC auditor says the city isn't tracking youth in the welfare or justice system. This new report from the Office of the DC Auditor and the Council for Court Excellence, which is a nonprofit, says that the city's failure to track this population has caused further harm, including youths mistakenly released from delinquency courts to adults, quote, to whom the youth should not be entrusted. Hamil, again, a problem that we have seen in the District
of Columbia
for decades.
I can go back to the DC receiving home. You know, the whole thing with the little girl that, was missing and she never out of the shelter system. This just seems to be the same problem decade after decade. Bowser was supposed to be a reformer, Adrian Fenty, but it's the same thing. I have walked from DC General to the old one, to the receiving home, to the Oak Hill, to everybody's hill, and wrote every story I could write at the Washington Post. And here we go again. And the thing about why doesn't it change? Because they issue a report, and we have a lot to talk about. But why doesn't change happen? Because these are babies that have raised babies that raise babies. And so now we still looking around like, what's up? It doesn't change. And I try to write a youth story almost one every other week, and it's still the same thing. And I'm shame on all of us. But then we'll go to the next couple years and we'll say shame again.
Yeah. Yeah. Sonia, this report comes on the heels of Brian Schwab, the DC's Attorney General, essentially is saying that the Bowser administration is not doing what it needs to do to improve youth services, specifically in the justice system. The Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, DYRS. The hits just keep on coming, but is the district government numb to this? Because as Hamil just said, this is not really new information.
Number one, yes. Number two, I do wonder to what extent congressional oversight plays a role here. Because
explain that. Why do you think that's an issue?
And this is not to say that the DC government needs to be let off the hook, but many years ago, at least 25, I forget how many now, there was a move by Congress to require DC's budget and programming and very structure really of the DC government to have oversight from Congress. And so anything that the district wants to do has to be approved by Congress. So I do wonder, I haven't given that report the deepest read yet, but the immediate question in my mind is, to what extent does this dysfunctional Congress we look at right now, that has done very little to nothing over the past couple of years, this current session, to what extent does that play a role in what the district can and cannot accomplish? The government being set up as it is operates on autopilot to a degree. And so absent the approvals that they need from Congress, are they simply spinning their wheels? And that's a part of why nothing gets done, other than the fact that governments tend to be glacial in their pace of getting things accomplished, and they don't pivot well. They pivot about like the Titanic did, you know? And so they don't understand the extent to which they can function in a proper way. Yeah. They rely upon structures that are in place for a long time, and people who say, well, this is the way we've always done it. There's very little room for innovation. And you pair that with what we are dealing with right now and the effects of the pandemic on our young people and their mental stability and their ability to function, their ability to move. And it's just a disaster waiting to happen. That's almost like the perfect storm for this type of disaster. Can a better government response even ameliorate this problem? Is the question. So, I mean, I do have that question in the back of my mind. Is Congress liable in this too, by failing to adequately approve funding programs, budgets, proposals, et cetera, for the district government?
And you know what, we can't
hold on, Hamil. I want to get Brian in this real quick before we move to the next topic. You know, Brian.
In listening to this, I agree. You know, where exactly is Congress at when it comes to, you know, the funds that are needed to provide these resources for the crossover youth? I mean, you hear from Tracy Velasquez, who was asked the very question, and she's the policy director for the Council of Court Excellence, or better known as CCE. And she said that this is not just an issue in DC, this is an issue across the country. This is not just something that shows up here. You know, it is something that is done, and there's a lack of communication and rapport between welfare systems and the juvenile systems, and it needs to be more done. You know, we are failing our kids essentially. You know, no matter what their circumstances are or their economic status, they should be provided resources such as therapy to be able to go over the things that they're dealing with and to get the educational resources to get out of those situations, including the welfare. So what exactly is Congress doing right now? And we know historically Congress likes to delay every single thing. It is not a new situation. So I wish we had a little bit more information on this.
Go ahead, Camille, real quick.
One good thing. There are good stories. I just covered something that's going to come out tomorrow about prison fellowship. One kid was a little girl. Her daddy was sentenced to 99 years in jail. She's now a physician, PhD, in her young 30s. I met her, and I met so many people, young people who are doing things. They had first baptism going on, and it's interesting how many people are success stories, but you may not hear about them. They may be
but no, this isn't about the success story.
But we need to talk about it because we make a big deal.
No. This report is not about the success stories.
I know it's about the tough stories.
Right?
Why did that change?
No, this report is not about the success stories. This report is about what the District of Columbia is not doing for children that are in the system. We're not talking about those.
Okay. And again, when I'm staying on, well, do you write the story? Yes, you do. We cover both sides of it.
Yeah, but okay, let me stop you because you're getting into the weeds and off topic. Right. That is not what this conversation is about. We can talk about that another time. About this audit report and children. I'm running out of time, and I do want to talk about this viral video coming out of New York City. I'm going to play a little bit of this and then get your responses on the other side. Well, there you have it, Sonia. Let me start with you and your thoughts about that, because I only have about 3 minutes. You've seen the video. Your thoughts about it?
First of all, I want to know what the mother's situation is.
The police apparently did let her. We saw right at the end. The police did let her go.
So that is just the beginning of the story. You know, the real story is what's this mother up against for this baby to be at a saturation point. That baby was clearly at a point where she could not take any more. Yeah. And you have to, I think compassion is in order. I mean, kudos to the cops who did let her go. But my first thought upon looking at that video was the mother trying to get food for the daughter and for herself.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Camille,
you know,
your
I like
thoughts
what
about
Sonia said. Sonia, you saved this. What is the mother up against? Little girl, same thing. Alicia Roy, 4-year-old, died. What was the mother up against? 3-year-old little girl shot last week in Southeast 2 weeks. What is the mother up against? Gunshot wound to the head. That's the question. And that's where we need to be for reporting or whatever. Shame in the government, fame for some. And I think you're right, Harold. How can we drill into this at that level where the baby is crying out?
Yeah. Brian, your thoughts real quick.
Yeah, my heart goes out to her. When I saw the video, it was a very short clip, but it was very telling of what the little girl might be going through day to day. She seemed like she was a little bit more mature for her age than expected. Yeah. It doesn't seem like that was the first time that she's had to defend her mom in that manner. And let's face it, the NYPD, along with a lot of other police organizations across the country, are facing heat for how disproportionate they are in attacking, essentially Black folks. So, it was in their right mind to let her go if they didn't have any proof to begin with. But it's trauma. There's a lot of trauma there. So I really hope that this girl gets the help that she needs and the mother gets the help that she needs.
Yeah, let us hope so. The mother did handle this well, I think. She did handle it well, and probably because she didn't steal anything. So
I also think her lack of indignation was the saving grace here. I mean, this woman wasn't up against wasn't railing against the system knowing she was wrong. And so that made me say, what is she up against exactly? What is she dealing with in this store, having to go in the store under what conditions did she go in there under, beyond whether she did anything legal or illegal?
Yeah.
Like what she
and the daughter called out her aunt saying, I know who stole them. She called out her aunt. Gang, thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts and your intellect as we talked about some of the top stories of the week. I really, really appreciate it, and we'll be talking again soon.
Good.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
That is the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, May 29th. I'm Harold Fisher.